Hi, friends. Welcome to Bar of the Conference. I'm your host, Derek Scott III. Today's episode is with Lloyd Nyarota. Lloyd is an ordained elder born and raised in Zimbabwe. He and his wife, who is also an ordained elder and GBGM missionary, along with their 2 kids, have lived in Western Canada since 2015. Lloyd serves an ecumenical appointment just north of Alberta. As always, this podcast is about the stories that shape United Methodist and how those stories are shaping the future of our denomination. And y'all, Lloyd has stories. He also has experience, perspective, lessons learned, and gifts to share. Lloyd brought all of this to our interview, and in my opinion, I think we need to hear as much of it as possible. So we're sharing this interview with Lloyd in 2 parts. Part 1 is primarily about his journey of faith and entrance into United Methodism. The details, though, are really important as we think about the context of ministry and structure in Zimbabwe. I think you're going to be glad that I didn't edit these stories out. It's a really important episode. So grab those notebooks, that choice beverage, and let's listen to this episode with Lloyd Nyarota. Reverend Lloyd Nyarota, how you doing today, my friend?
Fine. How are you doing, Derek?
I am great, and I'm really grateful to you for joining me on this podcast. Really excited to have you and to hear some of your story and just the ways that God is using you these days. I know a little bit about Lloyd. I know that you were born in Zimbabwe, but that's about all I know about how you became a follower of Jesus and a United Methodist. So can you just give us a little bit of the story of how you came to faith, how God's prevenient grace reached out to you and brought you into our denomination?
Oh, okay. Right. It's quite I say sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes it's a story that surprises me when I begin to tell it. Like I say, I was born in Zimbabwe in the 70s, like 1970 to be precise. That's when I was born in Zimbabwe. Suddenly, unfortunately, what happened in 2 years after I was born, my parents separated and I went with my grandmother. So I was basically raised went with my mother. So I went with my mother and I was certainly raised by my grandmother. That's on my mother's side. So, and she was a devout Anglican person. And when I was born, I was just born by the age of the Anglican mission station at St. Thomas Maveja. So my parents' house were just sharing a fence with the Anglican church. So I was born right there. And on my father's side, majority of that family is Anglican. And then went to be raised by my grandmother. She was a devout Anglican. That's why I tell people I become a Methodist by accident.
Yeah.
Because I was supposed to be Anglican. Right. But then when I was about to start school, the war broke out, the war of liberation in Zimbabwe. The war broke out, catch up into our area. So I could not go to school because the schools in the villages were closed because of the war. Then my mom wanted us to get education. She wanted us to have good education. So she brought us to the town of Rusape. That's in eastern Zimbabwe, which was our nearest bigger town from my village of Chitenderano. So she brought us to Rusape so that we would get education. That was 4 of us, me and my 3 sisters. So as we were there, my mom was not a professional. So the way she raised us was she would go and work for the white settlers as a nanny, a babysitter, a cook, a housemaid, a house help for the white settlers. She worked for the Greeks, the Italians, the British, some Indians, and all that, so as to raise us. So in order to supplement that income, we had to go sell things at the market. That's where the story of my faith then comes in. So we used to go sell things. So after school, I will pick up a basket of tomatoes, bananas, go around in the neighborhood, sell that stuff. Friday after school, go to the big marketplace in Rusape, the bus terminus, where all the transit buses would stop going to different villages and all that. And then we'll be selling bananas, boiled eggs, you name it. Anything that can sell at the market, would sell that stuff. So that was our routine. I was also a soccer player. So we used to play plastic ball. So we'd make balls from plastic bags and stuff like that, fill it with some paper, and then play the ball. So we used to play what we called in Vengere money games. So Vengere then was, up to now, is divided into sections by alphabets. So there is the B sections, there is the R section. So houses like R1, R2, R3, then B1, B3 to B200 Shakti, then the G section and all that. So we were in the R section and ours was called the upper R section. So we would create a team, a soccer team, and then play a money game. If you put a penny, then you get 2 pennies. If you put 5 cents, then you get 5 cents. If you put a dime, then you get 2 dimes if you win the game. It was a winner-take-all money game. So what you put, you get double because the other team will bring the same amount. If you are playing a money game for $5, that means you put $5, the other team puts $5. Then winner takes all, and then you split double what you have put on. So there was this particular Sunday, there was this match, this money game that our part of Ma'ara needed to win that match. And it was going to be played on a Sunday. My friends persuaded me not to go to the market so that we would win this game. And then I could not find a good reason of not going to the market to play the game. So I thought of every trick in the trick books in the ghetto. I couldn't get one. That would convince my mom that I could not go to the market.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, church popped up. So I went to my mom and say, I want to go to church today.
Wow. Okay.
So just imagine a single mother raising a boy in the ghetto, and the boy is talking church. Who would say no? So that I found that was the deal. But let me tell you something that happens that day. My mother looked at me and I could see tears in her eyes, because this is what she was saying to me. Look here, yes, going to church, brilliant idea. I would want you to go to church, but you have no clothes for church. I had no clothes for church because the best clothes I had was my school uniform, my brown coffee shirt and short for Vengere Primary School. So that's why the best clothes I had. Besides that, there was nothing that I would go to church with. So my mom said, okay, now here's the deal. You go to the market today and go to the market the whole week. Every profit you make from today until Thursday, Friday, we will use that to buy you Sunday clothes church. And then next Sunday you can go to church. I quickly get over, tell my friends to postpone the game to next Sunday because I got an offer from the market next Sunday. Postpone the game, postpone the game. So the game was postponed. I went to the market. I will not tell the stories of the week. I want to quickly come to the story of the Sunday. So my mother honored her side of the deal. Every day I get the sales. I come, do the count, cash in. She selected the profit. I think by Thursday I had worked hard enough to cash in enough money for Sunday for clothes. So Friday, mom is coming back from work. She brought me a t-shirt and a short and a long trousers. I remember their color. The long trousers was a sky blue, pocketless with elastic band on the waist.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a dark blue t-shirt with a front. It had a kind of a rocket, and it was written tornado. And then black tennis shoes, we called them tenderfoot in Zimbabwe then. They were black tennis shoes. So Sunday, I dressed for church in the morning. Out I went to church in the morning. You know what? I didn't know which church I was going to because the church was not the business, man. Business was the ball game after church.
Yeah.
So I went down in our neighborhood in Vengere. Then churches were lined up facing the school, the primary school. So I just left to go home, going down like I'm going to school like I do every day. When I was facing the school gate, that's when I realized, oh, by the way, I'm going to church. Which church? So I was faced with 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 churches. I was faced with 4 churches, 2 on my left, 2 on my right. So I looked at the 4 churches, and I was trying to decide which church. And I then thought, okay, which church should I go to? In my mind, something came up. The church in the village. The closest church in the village, which was a Methodist church. It was painted white and black bitumen at the bottom. Bitumen paint. So I said, okay, so a church that is painted white with the black bitumen, that's where I go to, because that must be the same church as the church in the village. The Methodist church was pink.
Oh, wow.
Pinkish, yellowish, was not the same. So I was faced with the 2 churches painted white with the black bitumen at the bottom. Then I played a game we used in the village when you are looking for your cattle. 2 games, you spit your saliva in your hand, strike it with your finger, wherever the majority of the saliva goes, that's where your cattle are. You follow that direction.
That is one technique for sure.
So I used that to choose a church between the 2 that were in front of me, strike the saliva, and the saliva was split in half in 2 directions. And then I say, okay, I'm going to play the second game. If that happens, then you go to option 2. There's a game, I think here, that game you end up by, my mother told me to choose this one, but I choose this one. Yeah, the similar one we play in Zimbabwe as kids, which we called Mutsa Tsuro Ndeake. Tsuro is a rabbit. So I played that game and then ended up on the church one that was on my left side. So I went in. And you know what? Why I always tell people I become a Methodist, if I had gone on the church on the right side, that was the Anglican church. I would have become an Anglican. But I went on the church on the left, which was next to the Methodist church. And that church was the CCAP, the Church of Central Africa Presbyterian. That's a church for migrants from Malawi.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they speak Nyanja in that church. Just like what my wife is doing in Canada now. She has a migrant church that speaks Shona. So I went into that church. They were speaking Nyanja. I didn't hear a word. And that was none of my business anyway. I waited for church to come to an end, went to the game, played the plastic game. We won the game. I got my 10 cents and I was good. Yeah. Now I got home and mom asked me. My mother was doubting if I really wanted to go to church. Then my mom asked me, did you go to church? Yes, I was way past the church time. So church had ended and I had gone for the ball and I was looking very dirty with the new clothes. And there's no church that brings a dirty kid like that home. So, and my mom is like, okay, tell me one thing that was said in church. I was blank. It was all in Nyanja or Chichewa. Can you sing one song that was sung in church? I was blank. The songs were in Nyanja and Chichewa. So I was about to get a strong beating. My mom, if she started beating you, she would beat you good. Then the next door guy, our neighbor, they were from Malawi. And he was talking to my sister, Magdalene, telling my sister, asking her if we were from Malawi also. Because Lloyd was in our church today. And Magdalene came quickly and said, no. He went to church. Joseph is just telling me that he was in their church. So he went to the wrong church. So that's why he doesn't know anything that was said, any songs, because it was all in Nyanja and Chichewa. And that's what saved me. Derek, I was done with church stuff because it almost put me in trouble.
It did.
I forgot about church, all about it. I was done with church. I was up the weekend for my business to go to the market, find other ways to get off or get my dish, my supplies, go play the game and ask the guys to buy whatever I'm selling so that I'm not in trouble when I get back home. So the teams become my market if we have a game. Good. Now, I have not answered the question. How did I then become a Methodist? Then I wanted to wear my Sunday best clothes. Then I knew church works. And also church would make me wear my clothes. Church would give me an off day from the market. So some months down the line, I woke up and say, I'm going to church today. Okay, wear my clothes. And I was told, okay, now you go to church. The church you are talking about in the village, the Methodist church, is next to the CCAP. So if you want to go to that church, it's next to the CCAP. This other church is the Anglican. If you want to go to the Anglican, go to that. But my mom says, go to the Methodist church. So I went to the Methodist church. Then I found friends there. And that's how I became a Methodist. I found friends. One of my friends I found then that first day who was living close to us in our neighborhood, whom we used to play soccer ball with, is also now a Methodist ordained minister in South Africa. His name is David Mcherera. We grew up together. So that's how I became a Methodist. And that became part of my faith formation. From that Sunday, one Sunday led to the other, and I became a leader in the youth group. But that first Sunday became important when we talk about my call to ministry.
Yeah, well, and we can keep going there. I think, and this is not crazy to imagine, but I think the testimony of a number of people of how they found church in general, but even specifically United Methodism, is they had no intentions of going to church, but then it became advantageous to at least say I was going to church.
Yes.
And then eventually I found myself in church. So I think there are a lot of people listening. It's like, yeah, that checks out. That totally checks out. So to tell us how, you join this church, this Methodist church in the village, and tell us about your call to ministry, how it becomes more than just a church you attend, but this becomes sort of a vocation for you.
Yeah. So I became, I started going to church more frequently, more Sundays, until it was every Sunday. Then I was in the youth group with my friends. I started working in the youth. I then get baptized and then confirmed and then become a UMYF full member. I became a leader in the UMYF at our Vengere United Methodist Church, and then in our church, the second then, which was composed of 6 churches with the different ministers who came. And we were still going to the market. I was still selling at the market during the weekends and during midweek, but Sundays for church. And as a leader, youth leader, then I started having responsibilities leading the youth in the district, then in Makoni district. But then come again, 1988. This was late 70s when I started coming to church, 79. So 1988, that's when I wrote my high school examinations, O-level. And something that what I told you at the beginning, that my parents divorced when I was 2. And I was the brother of 3 sisters. My mother remarried, and I have another sister and brother, half sister and another half brother. So here I was the elder brother by this time. And everything, all the time as I was growing up, my sisters and everyone used to tell me I was the man of the house. And I had that responsibility to be the father of the house. Mm-hmm. And my sisters and my mother, they would all in life depend on me as the man of the house. Mm. Derek, I was not a very, very intelligent student. I was just an average and below average student. Yeah. I mean, with all the time to go to the market, I had not enough time to study to become that top A student. I was an average student. I always struggled to get 50%, knowing that I scraped through. Now, in Zimbabwe, in the education system in Zimbabwe then, in 1888, this is few years after independence, and things are beginning to change. Now the system is O-level is when life ends or begins. If you pass your O-levels, then you go. If you fail, you're almost redundant and thrown out of the system.
Wow.
So my O-level examinations were coming and starting 25 October 1988. That's when I was going to write my first examination O-level Shona paper. And what I tell you is, when we opened the school in August, after we had paid the examination fees in the second term, when we opened the schools in September for the third and final term in 1988, when I showed up at school and began, everyone was talking about O-level examinations being just about a month away. That conversation brought something into my mind. I began to remember the responsibility that was on my shoulders for my siblings and my mother, and the story that I was the man of the house. And then I knew that if I fail O level, then I was done, and I was shattering too many hopes.
Yeah.
And then I knew I was carrying the hopes of men on my shoulders. So a month before my final exams start, 25 September 1988, I left the house and I went out into the bush. There's a place we used to go for prayers with my friends as youth, as the boys. There's a place we used to go out for prayer and all that. In the Methodist church in Zimbabwe, that is popular, known as the Parker. Parker is translation of park, which is a prayer park. But then it's known as a Parker, somewhere you go to pray. So we had that Parker. That day I went alone, early in the morning. I did not go with my friends whom we used to go with. That day I went alone. That is on the north side of the Rusape General Hospital. I went there. There's a big boulder rock there we used to gather with friends to pray. I went there. And now, here's the connection. My first day in the Methodist church, in in 1979, the sermon that was preached that day, I don't remember a thing. I didn't remember it. But there's something that was said. Later on, I discovered that was Reverend Josiah Chidzikwe, and he was a district superintendent who was preaching that Sunday at Vengere United Methodist Church in 1978-79, I think. He said something that came to my mind that morning. I don't remember what text he read. I don't remember the rest of his sermon up to this day. But I remember these words he said in his sermon. I don't know what he was talking about, but he said these words. He said when he was born, he was stuttering. He was born with a stutter. And I remember he said, for him to pronounce the word was, he will shake all his body and stamp his foot, and probably sometimes tears would come down before he finishes pronouncing was. Yeah. And he said that has been his life. But then he said, he prayed to God and said, God, if you enable me to speak, I will serve you as a preacher. And he said, you can hear me now. I repeat some words. God healed me of my stuttering, and that's why I'm a preacher today.
Wow.
That was Reverend Josiah Chidzikwe. I didn't know his name then, and I tell you, his name, I had to search for it when I was already a pastor. I had to search who was that man, and then I found out he was a district superintendent in the district then. So that morning, as I was going to the Parker to pray, when I faced that boulder, those words of Reverend Josiah Chidzikwe came into my mind. And I made this prayer. I remembered, if you tell God something and commit, God will do it. He did it to Reverend Josiah Chidzikwe. That time I was just saying, he did it to that preacher. And I'm going to do the same. And I did the same prayer. Lord, I know what is before me. I have to pass. I have no option. I'm not intelligent, but I have to pass. I have to pass my O level. Now, if I pass, I will serve you. I made that commitment that day. And here is what happened from that day 25 September, a month before my exams starts. 25 September 1988. Something happened that night. In Rusape, the town I grew up in, there are two trains that pass our town at night. They used to in the 80s and 90s. One train comes from the eastern town of Mutare, border town of Mutare, going to the capital in Harare. That train passes Rusape, used to pass Rusape 12 midnight. The train from the capital Harare, the passenger train, going to Mutare to the eastern town, pass our Rusape town at 3 a.m. Now, this is what used to happen. The train would stop 3 a.m., arrive 3, and leave around 3:30, thereabout. You know, when trains are crossing roads, where the rail cross the road, the train blows its horn to warn traffic that the train is coming. Every day, 25 past 3 or 3:30, that train will blow the horn to cross the road going to Mutare. And I would wake up. That horn would wake me up. And the Spirit will always tell me to study. I will have this push on study. Now read. And I would not go to sleep. So I would, every day from 25 September 1988, the train 25 past 3 blows the horn. I wake up. My spirit says study. I pick up my books. I start reading for my examinations. That happened every day. I wake up. I study from 3:15, 3:30, until it's time to take a bath and off to school. Even on weekends, I would wake up, I would study. And that's how I studied for my ordinary level examination. And here's the thing that makes me believe it was God. 5 December 1988, I wrote my last commerce paper, 5 December. So 5 December, 3:30 a.m., I heard the horn blowing. I woke up. I studied for my commerce paper like I was doing all these months. I studied for my commerce paper. I went, I wrote that paper, finished it around 4 p.m. Come back home. Played, refreshed, have my supper, went to bed early that day. I think I went to bed around 9 p.m. or so. I went to bed.
Not bad, yeah.
Yeah, 5th December. On the 6th of December, 6th December, my mom went to knock at my door around 10 a.m. and say, hey, is there somebody still in that house, in that room? And that's how I woke up. I didn't hear the train bell.
Oh, wow.
My exams were done. Yeah. And I never heard that train bell unless I was intentionally listening for it since then.
Wow.
And when my results came later in 1989, I passed my O-levels. And then I was thinking of doing some other things, but I remembered God kept his side of the deal. I had to keep my side of the deal.
Yeah.
And I told my pastor I was ready to serve as a minister. But even with that story, I can tell you something again. My name was presented to the official board by my pastor. I was turned down. The official board turned down my name.
The Board of Ordained Ministry or
No,
Committee on Ministry?
No, the official board at the local church, which we are calling church councils these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, it used to be called the official board then.
Gotcha.
Now it's called the church council or executive, whatever, at the local church. Yeah, because the pastor parish relations presents the names for those who are discerning their call to ministry in the local church.
Right.
So when my name was presented, irrespective that I was the youth president, my name was, the official board said no. And you know why the official board said no? Because I was coming from a broken family. I told you about the divorce of my parents when I was 2.
Yeah.
I told you about my 2 half siblings. That meant my mother remarried and had 2 half siblings. Now, there were 2 issues. I was coming from a broken family, and my mother, when my mother remarried, she remarried as a second wife. So a child of that kind of a woman would not become a pastor. So my name did not pass.
Wow.
And my pastor, whom by today's standards people would call a progressive in the Methodist, because he's playing against the grain.
Right.
He brought back my name. Reverend Caleb Mkas, he brought back my name and say, I'm presenting it for the second time. The official board said no, we said no. This young man cannot. He comes from a broken family. It was when my name came for the 3rd time.
Oh my.
There's a woman, I will not mention names of people who were saying no, but I will mention the name of a woman who stood up for me. There's a woman who was the church treasurer. Her name was Mrs. Alice Malikura. She rarely spoke, very quiet. She was known as a quiet woman. And I think that's why people had made her a treasurer. She asked a question to the official board and say, hey, who are we talking about here? Our youth president or his mother? Who are we talking about? And that's when everybody began to open up and say, this young boy is one of our favored preachers here. Good preacher. Who disagrees? This young boy is leading all our children, is our youth president for the circuit, and is in the leadership of the district youth. And we allow him to lead our children, to preach, to lead in the district, and we say he cannot be a pastor. That's how everyone opened up their mind, and that's how I then passed.
Lloyd, the build up to this part of your story, I didn't predict that this is where the story was going to go. and correct me if I'm understanding it wrong. They kept turning you away because of the family structure you were a part of.
Right.
They weren't really assessing your gifts or graces for ministry. They were just making a determination about you based on a social construct.
Yes, and you know, Derek, I had people who were in that official board who had said to me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I talked to them about being a journalist, being a lawyer, and some of them had said to me, have you considered ministry? You are a good preacher, boy. I remember one of those elder men, I was sitting on his tractor mudguard as we were going to plow on our fields, and he said, Brother Lloyd, what really do you want to be? And I say, okay, if I finish, I want to be, if I pass, probably I'll go to law school or be a journalist and some of those. And he said, have you considered being a pastor? You're a good preacher. He was in that official board that was turning my name down because somebody had raised concern about the family structure I was coming from. And I think it dawned on some of the people who were there and say, oh yeah, he comes from a broken family. How can he be a preacher? And I want to tell you, this was something serious in the United Methodist Church in Zimbabwe then. It was something very serious. Who you are was determined by the family structure you come from. And it's part of the culture. It's part of the system. I'm not blaming anyone who was in that official board. They were just addressing an issue that would create a problem to have a pastor who is coming from that kind of a family. It was not biting. It didn't make sense.
Wow. Lloyd, thank you for sharing all of that. I think it leads me to a specific question. Tell us some of the unique features of United Methodism in Zimbabwe, things that we in the U.S. may not understand, that are significant differences of the way the United Methodist Church lives out its witness in the country of Zimbabwe.
One thing I would put up front, probably that the people in Zimbabwe, when they, in the United Methodist Church in Zimbabwe, in all these areas I've told you I served, most of those places didn't have church buildings. So church to most United Methodists in Zimbabwe has nothing to do with a church building with a steeple. I've pastored churches that worship under a tree, like literally under a tree. We sit on stones and bricks and have service. I've been to many churches I've pastored that meet in classrooms, school classrooms. Talk to the school head, ask for a classroom, then we'll use that classroom as our church. And that will be known as the United Methodist Church that meets in the grade 3 classroom.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and people come to church, whether it's under a tree, whether it's in a classroom, whether it's in somebody's house, whether it's at the back of somebody's grocery store. I've been in churches like that. People come to church because they want to worship, because they have an experience with God. They have something that they can tell you about what God has done in their lives. And one thing that I tell you, all those churches, those United Methodists in those churches, they are hopeful that one day they will have their church building. Even if every Sunday they collect a maximum of $3, equivalent of $3, they never lose hope that someday God is going to provide for them, that they will have a building they will call their own, their church. But that does, before that building, it doesn't hinder them to do ministry. It doesn't hinder them to preach and to bring and to make disciples. So that's the approach of church of the United Methodist in Zimbabwe. When they commit, I think I've seen deeper commitment, deeper faith. As a pastor, I've seen that most of the people who are committed to the faith, they will tell you an experience of their life, an experience and an encounter they had with God, with Jesus Christ, with the Holy Spirit, which they reference to and say, since then, I've never looked back.
Yeah.
and they are serious about their faith. And there's something again. United Methodists in Zimbabwe, they are Christians, and particularly United Methodist Christians. They love the United Methodist as a denomination.
Yeah.
It's part of their identity. It's part of who they are. It's part of the United Methodist Church have built who they are, have made them who they are, both spiritually and economic and family life. The United Methodist Church have done that, has presented a total gospel of the total person. And people identify their faith within the United Methodist. That is why it is very difficult to shake United Methodist to try in Zimbabwe, to try and pull them out of the United Methodist, because they have experiences, they have stories, they have witnesses and witnessed, and they have lived things of faith within the United Methodist, and they have testimonies, and they will not be shaken. That is why, probably just to let you know, with all this that is happening in the denomination now, the moment you tell most of United Methodists in Zimbabwe about leaving the United Methodist, then you have created a huge rift between the person you are talking to and your story. Because they cannot separate their faith and what God has done to them through the grace that has touched their lives, their families, and transformed their communities through the United Methodist. So there's that bond, a bond of faith. It's not just people. Sometimes I hear people make the mistake that people are attached to the name. No, it is the name that is attached to them, not them attached to them. Yeah, it is the United Methodist name that has been branded on us because of what experiences we have had. Not that bad things don't happen. They do happen in the United Methodist in Zimbabwe. But they do not overshadow the greatness of God and what God has done.
We hope you enjoyed the episode. Bar of the Conference is produced by the team at Wesley's Revival, a ministry of Studio Wesley. Subscribe to this show on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or Google platforms so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time.